So there's no doubt about that one of the best ways to learn landscape photography, learn composition, learn editing, learn all the basics is to get some photo critique, get some feedback on your photos. So I asked in my group, Photoshop for Landscape Photographers, if they wanted to provide some photos that I could give some feedback on, so both they and you guys out there can learn something from it. So right here, the first photo. Beautiful stuff indeed. So personally, I would find that maybe you could get a little bit closer to the foreground here. And for some reason, it seems a little bit washed out here in the bottom. So you could probably darken the blacks here. You could also play around with the highlights. It seems as if this mountain part here is blown out a little bit. Maybe bring the highlights down slightly. It makes the mountain stand out a little bit more. I would also say that these trees over here may be a little bit distracting, because I do guess that your focal point, your subject, is the mountain. So you could have maybe moved a little bit over to the left, and in that way you could have left these trees out here. Another beautiful photo here, what just springs in my eyes. There may be a little bit of like haloing thing up here around these stones. That's always one of the first things I see. How is the edges in your landscape? If there are these like white-ish lines you can see here, then it's definitely something you want to remove. That is also something I cover in Photoshop for Landscape Photographers. Besides that, the light is actually really beautiful. I'm not entirely sure whether this section over here is actually in shadow, and it's maybe a little bit too bright because the sun is here and this part is in shadow. But yeah, focal point out here, there's no doubt about that. Beautiful leading lines, beautiful sky, all well-rounded, beautiful photo. Maybe a little bit down with the shadows, but yeah, it's a matter of taste. And for the most part, when I critique these photos, a lot of it comes down to like very subjective taste. Here, beautiful photo. I do find it to be a little bit rough. I do enjoy the sky, that it haven't been like, you know, if you just bring down the highlights way too much, then we get these very sharp edges up here with the sun. So that's actually pretty good. You could bring down the clarity of the overall photo a little bit. I think it softens it up in a way where I'm like, yeah, it's a little bit more soft. I think that's the best way to say it. The main one thing, like I like the lines, I like how the light hits the scene, but I am a little bit in doubt about what the subject is. I guess it's this part here, looking out over the forest, but I do miss a little bit more in the photo. So the next photo here, beautiful shot from Scotland. What jumps to my eye is that this little gap up here is a little bit distracting. It becomes a high contrast area. Maybe crop it in, but then of course you offset the balance a little bit, so that the mountain is placed a little bit too far to the right side. We could of course crop in here, maybe all the way into the waterfall. Yeah, something like this. It's more a question about composition. I would also like a little bit more, a little larger gap up here on top of the mountain. Nice line leading in here. Again, personally, I would probably have preferred a little bit stronger foreground. I'm also biased because I have shot this place before. But yeah, overall, maybe a little bit of a crop. Very beautiful photo. Lone tree, sunset or sunrise. Not entirely sure. There's not a whole lot to it. Obviously, you can always decide to get out on another day so you don't have a completely clear sky. These stones over here may be slightly distracting, but overall there's not really a whole lot I would like to change here. You could maybe play around with the crop to put it straight there in the middle. Again, I'm just totally biased because I really enjoy those central compositions. There may be ever so slight a halo here above these stones, and maybe up in the tree you can see there's like bright spots here behind the tree that you may want to darken down. Just maybe clone stamp in some of the darkness here on a darken blending layer in Photoshop. If you also want to learn about editing in Photoshop and learn how to edit your landscape photos, be sure to sign up to my Photoshop course. It's 19 hours of content where I show both my techniques, the tools I use in Photoshop, and then I give you a whole lot of start to finish tutorials where you of course also get access to all the raw files so you can train on them yourself. Right now I have a summer sale going on for Photoshop for landscape photographers where you can get entire $100 off. So be sure to use this while you can. It is going to end very soon. There are links and coupon code down in the description of this video. Oh, beautiful shot. I've just been here. I really like the atmosphere in this photo. The only one thing, and it was also something I combated with when I was here photographing, is definitely these buildings out here. Doesn't look too beautiful. But yeah, there's actually not a whole lot I would change with this. Like, you can maybe play around with the slight crop, but then again, then you offset the church too much. Maybe, I don't know, something like this, and then if you can clone out this part. But yeah, again, it's totally subjective. Definitely not something that you have to do. Yes, we have a focal point here with the setting sun. Beautiful. Everything leads towards it. There's some leading lines leading in here. This is the high contrast area of the scene. Yeah, there's not a whole lot more I would change with this specific photo. The only one thing is that the subject in and of itself doesn't really jump out on me. If this is your home, of course you can relate to it, but for someone who doesn't know where it is, the scene in it of itself can be a little bit like, yeah, whatever. But compositionally and editing wise, beautiful. I really like it. Here, what I guess is from Scotland. I think I can recognize a little bit of it, but I'm not entirely sure. I do maybe find that the foreground is a little bit too bright relative to the background, and the upper right here is probably a little bit too dark. My estimated guess is that this part, this mountain out here, is the focal point. So I do feel that I miss something coming in from over here. Like, the photo is a little bit out of balance. It is very right heavy. So these stones over here is being balanced by these stones over here, but these stones and this background here is not really being balanced by anything other on the other side. So yeah, the water streaks, good as far as, yeah, 1 second shutter speed. You can always try with like a third of a shutter speed when it comes to waves coming towards you in the ocean. I find that often works really well. So yeah. So the next photo here, beautiful shot. The only thing is, oh, is that a tent? That's a tent, funny. I'm not entirely sure what it is, just cliff, probably is. This area over here is probably your focal point. It's maybe a little bit heavy with the vignetting, but yeah, there's not a whole lot I would change about it. The dodging down here in the stones, again, it's a matter of taste. Personally, I find that they may be a little bit too bright towards reality. Generally, I would say it's probably the vignetting that's a little bit too heavy in this photo. And here we have a beautiful forest scene. I like the atmosphere. The toning is maybe a little bit on the green side. Put in a little bit of magenta to combat those greens. When I look at this photo, my eye goes immediately to this small tree here in the foreground. And I think that is the focal point. And personally, I find that to be a little bit of a weak focal point. It's not a particularly interesting tree. It's not super aesthetic. It basically just looks as if it's like has had its top broken off. So when it comes to optimizing the aesthetics of a scene, I actually think in this particular case, the scene and the photo would have been a little bit better without this little twig tree here in the foreground. But besides that, like the toning, beautiful, nice balance. The trees here on a little bit on the left, but we have a stone down here and these background trees to kind of counterbalance it. So in that way, balance-wise, I find it to be pretty good. Here we have a Milky Way shot, and I'm pretty sure that it has been light painted from front. So when it comes to light painting, personally, I am not a big fan of front lit light painting. It looks a little bit odd, as if you have blown off a flash from the camera, and it's not a particularly aesthetic lighting. So I would personally have gone into the scene, and then I would have light painted these cliffs maybe a little bit from the side, and then have put more photos together. So you light paint a little bit, and then take that photo, light paint a little bit, take that photo, and so forth. And then you put it together in Photoshop. Also, I really do not like all these steps here in the sand. Human footprints in sand is super distracting, and it kind of also spoils the serenity of the scene. So I'm not sure you could clone them out, but for the most part, I'm not a big fan of it. There's also like, seems to be a little bit of like, you know, shadows here along the edge over here, and it's not the clouds here I'm talking about. It's like it gets really dark here, so it's probably like you've upped the shadows too much, or the highlights, and something you can combat a little bit with. The night sky, also a matter of taste, maybe a little bit on the blue side. I would probably warm it up just a hair bit, something like this here. But when it comes to exposure, when it comes to the single stars, like I can see that they are dots, they haven't trailed. So in that way, it's a good Milky Way exposure. Here, a mountainside. Personally, I find that, and it's probably also a glacier. I actually think, is this Svinafjallsjökull in Iceland? It probably is. The foreground is a little bit too messy, and my eye has a tendency to go to the mountain because it's reflected here. So it is actually the mountain that becomes the focal point for me, and actually not the glacier. What can you do more? Maybe bring down the highlights a little bit, bring in some information there. I would definitely have tried to eliminate all this stuff here in the foreground. I know some people would argue that it gives context to the photo, but personally I just think it's distracting. Especially if your point is to photograph the mountains and the glacier here in the background. And of course, if you want to learn even more about composition in landscape photography, be sure to get my 2 ebooks. Here I cover all the tools that I use in the field when I compose my photos, how I think. And each book ends with a chapter where I summarize it all and use all the different tools in different photos. There is a free light version of both versions if you want to check them out first. You can get one of them by signing up to my newsletter, which is also down in the description of this video. So here, very dark and moody and broomy clouds. I really like the clouds. You can maybe take out a little bit of the clarity in these clouds here. The foreground, yes, we have a nice leading line with the road. It leads into some trees. The foreground is a little bit also meh, because it's probably what you had right there to work with, but yeah, there's not really a whole lot in this field or in this field, and the trees are a little bit like, they're not standing out, but it's definitely a very dramatic moment. Here, really nice shutter speed with the water. You really get the drama here in the water. From what I can see, is this Lofoten? I'm pretty sure it's Lofoten up in Norway. When looking at this, my eyes go here first, and then up to the mountain, and then I'm kind of led out of the scene here towards left. One could argue you go to left and then up to the mountains. There's something about the stones over here on the left that is a little bit distracting and leads me a little bit out of the scene. So compositionally, that's probably what I would work a little bit more with in when I was there. I could imagine a more vertical shot. Something like, let's just unlock this. Something like this here. And then catch the scene as soon as a wave maybe breaks over and covers up the stones over there on the left. Maybe that could work. Toning wise, I like it. It's not too blue. It's very dark, it's very brooding, very moody. This shot here, probably also from Lofoten. It's some beautiful mountains, but that's kind of it. I feel that I miss some more proper foregrounds. It's that holistic sense about the photo that, yes, okay, mountains, and I just need more in the photo for this to work for me. Toning wise, yeah, maybe a little bit more contrast could work. Again, it's a matter of taste. That's a nice reflection right here. Beautiful mountains. I really like all these lines in the mountains. Really nice. You could maybe bring down the highlights a little bit, or use a linear gradient. Just bring down the exposure of the sky a hair bit, something like this. And you get a little bit more balance between the tonality in the sky and the tonality in the water. The only thing about this photo is that you of course photographed a mountain range, but a mountain range in and of itself, like, what is the focal point? I can see that there's probably some morning light going on here on the mountains, which is very beautiful. My eye tends to go from one side of the photo to the other all the time. Like, I don't find rest. I don't have that anchor point, that focal point where it's like, okay, this is what I'm looking at, and from there I can explore the photo. Here I'm just like, I don't really find rest for my eye, if that makes any sense. Besides that, beautiful toning, nice reflection, all that stuff. If you enjoyed this video so far, I would highly appreciate both a like and a comment. Do photo feedback work for you? Yes, no, maybe, I don't know. Also subscribe to my newsletter down in the description. This is where I give you all my new videos, notifications about my new videos, about workshops, about all my different products and so forth. So yeah, link to the newsletter down in the description. I'm a little bit in doubt about whether the shutter speed is, it's probably too long for my taste when it comes to catching these flying birds here. And it is definitely the birds, because also of the reflection that my eye go to immediately. So definitely a faster shutter speed when catching birds in this case here. I like the atmosphere, I like the colors of the photo, but the entire scene is also a little bit messy. My eyes also have a tendency to go over here to the left. These become high contrast elements, and that means that they are very dark on a bright background, or the other way around, and that has a tendency to pull attention over. So obviously you had to catch the birds when they were there, but maybe have gone a little bit further to the left and have left out these power line stuff over here in the left side of the photo. Also, there's just a big field of nothing dirt here. You need to eliminate a lot of these distractions, a lot of these things that are not like super aesthetic to look at, especially if you want to up the aesthetics. If you just want to catch the scene as it is, well then job done. But yeah, you need to simplify the photo a little bit more, that's for sure. And it helps a lot that there's atmosphere and fog here in the background. Very nice photo, very nice sunset. I'm not entirely sure where this is. It's actually quite interesting, because I think most photographers would probably have gone over here and just taken a photo of this part in here. But you have brought in some more foreground, immediate foreground, which is good at framing the scene. And for me, there's no doubt about that the focal point is in here with these rocks. You could probably crop it a little bit, like take out some of the sky. It's not adding a whole lot. Maybe take out a little bit of the foreground. And you can see there's a little tip of light over here in the side. Just take it in there. I think this is a stronger photo, because it's more focused on what it is you want to show. There's also a little bit of haloing going on over here along this little edge here. So you can see how it becomes, it's dark here, then it becomes bright, and then it's dark again. That is definitely a little bit of editing you want to fix. Noctilucent clouds. Noctilucent clouds are so beautiful. It's a great capture I think I've seen more photos from this summer where it was these Noctilucent clouds. Beautiful atmosphere also in the foreground. The only thing is that the foreground is also a little bit messy. I personally, if you could, I'm not sure you could that on location, would have moved further to the left and focused on this single tree here and left out these trees over here. You can see if you crop it in like this, even though it's a little bit weird format, we have a much simpler photo because we don't have those two other distracting trees there in the background. And you still have lots of the Noctilucent clouds in the scene, but we have a very clear foreground, midground, and then into the background trees and the sky. So even though it's a weird format, it was basically just to show that I can see there is some building here, and I can see these trees here, and they are a little bit distracting. It's just the foreground becomes a little bit messy, but besides that, it's beautiful toning, beautiful editing, maybe a little bit blown out in the Noctilucent clouds. Bring down the highlights a little bit if possible, but besides that, very nice. Oh, I think this is from Lanzarote. Nice leading line into the building. There's no doubt about what it is I'm supposed to look at. And then you have a fairly interesting background here where I'm not entirely sure what it is. Toning wise, looks really good. The only one thing you can nitpick is that there's not really anything here on the right side. So you have a leading line here, but you have chosen to use the wall here, put that straight in the middle. So we actually off balance the photo a little bit because we have a lot of vegetation here on the left, but we have nothing on the right. Personally, I would probably have moved just slightly to the left if possible, and just used in this composition, if this is the concept, have used the vegetation as the main leading line and not the wall as the main leading line. Then there's also up here, this part, this section here takes up a little bit of my attention, so it goes in here, and even though I see all these here, my eye have a tendency to go over here, and it's a little, it's off relative to all the other small half circles here. So again, if you have a lot of the same feature or the same shape all through your photo, the one that is different is the one that stands out, so it drags a lot of attention, so be aware of that. So here in this photo here, there's no doubt about that the focal point is the trees. Editing wise, there's not a whole lot. Maybe the vignetting is a little bit too hard, but I get distracted by this construction stuff here in the background and these lines over here. Also the foreground is a little bit messy. If possible, you could have moved a little bit to the right. Obviously that's maybe into the field, so always ask yourself whether that's the morally right thing to do. And then maybe have gone a little bit lower, so you have brought in a lot more of that wheat, and you have excluded the left part here over where it has already been harvested. In that way, I think you can really have simplified the scene much more and just had the wheat field there in the foreground and then the trees there maybe as a central composition. But yeah, editing besides the vignetting, there's not a whole lot I want to change about this. Gorgeous shot. What more is there to say? Beautiful atmosphere. I know the leading line. I know this location. I haven't been there myself, but I've seen this shot a lot of times. There's nothing about the editing I want to change. Compositionally, you can always argue whether these stones here are super beautiful. Right here, there's a person walking. I like that. Gives a little bit of scale. Maybe if you have moved a little bit forward so you didn't have this pole over here being cut off and actually just not have it in the scene. So maybe if you have got more moved a little bit forward and just have had it like this, let's just do like this. In that way it removes a little bit of distraction. When it comes to those poles along a fence, I usually try not to have one in like straight immediate foreground because it can become a little bit distracting. I've also offset the balance a little bit. I can move it a little bit in. So maybe just a little bit of a crop is all you need for this one. 3 beautiful trees in winter. The only thing with the editing is that maybe you would want to darken down. It's as if it's a little bit brighter here in the treetops. What I would also have done here in this case is probably just have gone closer to the snow and tried to use that as a little bit more of a foreground, just to eliminate these stones in here, and maybe is it some fence stuff going on, simply just to simplify the scene again. I like that you have the big tree, foreground tree here in the middle, and then there's a good distance between the two background trees. Here also maybe a little bit heavy on the blue vignetting or top here in the sky. And then there's just like that one thing that really bothers me. Each time you have a house, a car, a human being, almost anything, you have to be very, very conscious about what is the direction of that thing, what's the front and what's the back. And in this case you have photographed what I guess is a mill from the back. A mill is just more fun if you photograph it from the front. So you have a beautiful sunrise, you're shooting into the sun here, but I guess if you had gone to the other side of the mill, you would have had the mill, which is your subject, in a much flattering position. And then of course you would have got the front lights and maybe some clouds behind the mill that would have been lit by the sunrise. But right now you're just watching into the back of a mill, whereas when it is your subject, that is the one you have to take care of first and foremost, and then you compose the scene afterwards. So this photo here, beautiful, love the toning, love the atmosphere. Again, the vignetting is maybe a little bit on the heavy side. I would definitely make sure to reduce the vignette. There's a little person standing down here, that's quite nice, I like that detail. Overall, beautiful photo, nice sunrise. There's not a whole lot to say to it. I don't know the location. Maybe if there was a rock standing over here, which there obviously isn't, it would have been a little bit better balanced. There's not a whole lot more I can say to this that I would change. A winter shot from Yosemite, as far as I can see. Editing wise, maybe reduce the blacks a little bit, just to add a little bit of contrast. It's also a little bit too messy. You can see we have a lot of information with El Capitan over here on the left. We have some trees sticking out here, and we have all these rocks, and we have almost nothing on the right side. You can see if I crop in, we are not really losing anything. And that means you have a lot of dead space and stuff that you don't need in the photo. What I would have done, being on this location, I'm not entirely sure where it has been shot, is probably have either panned or moved a little bit to the left, kept it vertical, and then left out this stone here and maybe included some of these other stones and got a little bit closer to them. Again, not sure if it's possible, but just to emphasize those stones a little bit more. So yeah, and maybe brought in a little bit more of El Capitan. Obviously I don't know if there's a tree just right to the left of this photo. But yeah, that's what I would have done. Ooh, I know this place. Beautiful toning, beautiful lights, beautiful editing, nice leading lines leading you into the scene. A tiny thing I can see over here, there's a little bit of darkness going on, and then we get a bright line here along the lighthouse. So you may want to check up on that. And like the nitpicky thing is that obviously we have this dark part over here. Can also be a little bit distracting. Not sure if you could have moved a little bit further to the right, so you have excluded this part over here, the dark part here, and just had like clean foreground. But yeah, beautiful shot. Nice. I do not know where this is. Nice blue hour photo. Really good balance between the lights of the town and the ambient blue light. Nice balance. So we have interesting stuff here and interesting stuff here, so they are nicely balanced. Maybe just, I'm not sure whether there is anything over here, but big dark parts. So this is a composition thing. Maybe you could brighten it a little bit up. I'm not sure if we use a radial filter. Go in, brighten this up, this part here. Up the shadows a bit, just so it's not so heavily dark. Maybe bring in a little bit of warmth, like this. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. But nice balance, and you definitely have caught this place as it is in this beautiful winter idyllic scene here. This shot here, nice and sharp as far as I can see. Obviously, I think you would also have preferred that there was a little bit more water in the waterfall, so it's a little bit more interesting. Very wide angle, 14mm as far as I can see here. The good thing about a 14mm when you're shooting in like a tight location is that everything, all lines and so forth, just converge into like your subject, and putting it in the middle, there's no doubt about what it is I'm supposed to look at. I just feel that the waterfall could have been a little bit more interesting than it is right now, but obviously that's not something you can do much about on location. You just have to wait until it's more interesting. Toning wise, editing wise, yeah, nice. Maybe a little bit too dark up here in the side, but yeah, that's it. So here is the last shot. I really like the person, stands out really nice. The trees here, what am I supposed to see? The trees, the mountains, probably the mountain. I like the triangular shape here. It's definitely pulling some attention, especially also with the reflection in the water. Beautiful scene. Maybe it would have been more interesting with a cropping it in like this. Simply just, it makes the mountains look bigger because we can't see the top. That may be a crop to consider. I find it maybe a little bit more dramatic. So yeah, there's not a whole lot I want to change when it comes to the editing part. It's nice. Maybe a tad bit dark over here, but I guess the sun is just hitting over here, so it's probably fine. So yeah, really nice. The trees may bother me a little bit, but yeah, if you crop it in, suggestion, there may be it may be a little bit more dramatic. Okay guys, I hope you all learned a little bit from this little feedback session. Obviously, if you want to learn even more about composition and Photoshop, there are links to both my ebooks and my Photoshop course down in the description. Remember to use the coupon code and use the summer sale opportunity for the Photoshop course. It is $100 off right now, and it's going to end very, very soon. So as always, I would highly appreciate both a like and a comment.